Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending from which part of the world you're from or you're following us today. My name is Giulia Forgnone, and I work as a policy officer at Euroheat and Power. And today I will be the honor to moderate this session where we're gonna have the opportunity to discover two different projects coming from two different parts of the world. Today's event is sponsored by Engie, who is also involved in one of the projects we're going to discuss about today. So one of these projects, we will hear about district heating and cooling modernization in Ottawa, Canada, from Tomasz Smetny-Sowa, who is a senior program director at Public Services and Procurement in Canada. And then we're going to travel all the way to Egypt in Alamein, where we're going to hear about the district heating, a new district cooling project from Erin Lindstrom from DEVCCO. So before we start, I'm just going to give you an overview of how the webinar will take place. So we're going to start with a 50-minute presentation from each of the speakers. And then we are going to open the floor from Q&A. Maybe if we go back to the slide of the Q&A so that everyone can see what I'm talking about now. Thank you so much. So I invite you everyone to please write your question in the Q&A box, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, or simply raise your hand when the Q&A time starts, and I will take all your questions and address them to the speakers. So thank you for the time. Enjoy the world tour. And now we're going to start with a presentation by Tomasz. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon for those who are in a European sphere. My name is, Giulia said, Tomasz Smetny-Sowa. I'm director with the project, and I do the presentation. First slide. It's a quick history lesson, and I don't want to insult everybody, or not history, the geography lesson. But when I do the presentation in the US, most people know where Montreal or Toronto is. Nobody really knows where Ottawa is. So just to put us on the map, as you can see, you are in almost on the border with US, and we span across two provinces, province of Quebec and province of Ontario. And our district energy system spans through the river that is a border between the two provinces that create additional problems for us because we got two different jurisdictions to deal with. Okay, what the program is all about? ESAP stands for Energy Service Acquisition Program. Public Works own and operate district energy system in Ottawa and Gatineau. We serve roughly 80 buildings for heating and 67 for cooling. Cooling was added in late 70s, and heating started back in 1916 to be exact. At the present time, we serve about 1.6 million square meters of space and about 55,000 people, mainly government officials. So there are three stages to ESAP. The first stage is modernization of the existing system, and it's based on a natural gas. The second stage is deeper greening. What we mean by that, we try to find out the solution to eliminate GHG, mainly natural gas, with something else. And the third, stage 3 will be expanding the network to other buildings in Ottawa downtown core. What we try to achieve, as you can see on this graph, we try to get by 2030 to net zero. That means reduce the GHG emission from our baseline in 2005 down to zero. At 2005, we were roughly 100,000 tons a year GHG emission by all kind of implementation. Up to 2015, we reduced it to about 70% of the 2005 baseline. Then stage 1, that will be 2015 to 2025, which is a modernization of the system that used to be a steam system, still is a steam system. We want to go into the low temperature hot water, will drop down to 37%. So really 1/3 of our baseline. And deeper greening will drop it down by 2026 to 9%, that's under 10. And the remaining is basically peaking, and that we envision to do with the renewable natural gas. And this 10% by 2030. Our ambition is to get down to 0. We'll see how it goes, but we hope to get there. Geographical location where we are in Ottawa, we got 5 plants and spread around the city. One plant, National Printing Bureau, is in Quebec. The river is the border between 2 provinces, and the rest of the plants are located in Ontario, in Ottawa. At the present time, only 2 plants are connected. Cliff, that it's our main plant, is smack downtown, right in a government district, and Little National Research Center plant that is a backup for Cliff in case of problems. For some reason, I can't move the slide. We see what here we go. So under stage 1, we plan to connect the Gatineau plant, Quebec plant, and the Smetny-Sowa plant that is on the far west into the one network. We'll have distribution connection all the way across, and we also want to go through the Portage Bridge, which is the red line that you can see connecting in 2 places, Gatineau and Ontario. And the reason for it that eventually we'll have a complete loop and we'll be feeding the system from Ontario and Quebec depends on a fuel cost and availability of the fuel, and in case of some disruptions. We had a couple of disruptions in utilities here in Ottawa, and it happened that when Ontario electricity grid was down, the Quebec was still up, and vice versa. When it was ice storm on Quebec side and the grid went down, Ontario grid was still up. So that will give us resiliency of the system working from 2 different provinces. Also, supply of the natural gas for 2 provinces from different network. A quick history, 1920, that's when that's the first picture we have of the plant that was built in 1916. As you can see, the plant is almost invisible, blending into the escarpment. That's the picture on the left side. Today, you can see the plant. At the bottom is the plant, and half of it is abandoned. The little plant on the top, the white building, what you see is a temporary boiler plant that we had to build very quickly when the boiler exploded in a bottom plant, and asbestos was spread throughout the whole plant, and basically the plant was shut down. Originally, it was scheduled to be shut down for a month, then for a year. We built this temporary boiler plant to be operational for a year. It has been in 2009, so many years later, it's still temporary and still working. And hopefully under the modernization, this plant will be removed and a new plant will be built down at the bottom. But as you know, temporary solution lasts for a long time. This is the view, the rendering of the future plant when it's modernized. So it's gone from the top and it's all screened by the mesh, mimicking the escarpment. The 2 white chimney, stainless steel chimney that will be at the top, supposed to blend nicely with the landscape, so it's not that obscure like a regular chimney. And the top of the plant at the present time, this is the roof. You're actually looking at the roof of the plant. At the present time, it's all fancy in barbed wires. You can't access it, but it's a beautiful view from the top of the plant onto the river on the Quebec side. So we were thinking about making it as a park and make it accessible to all the Canadian and tourists. It's at the end of the tourist path down at the top of the escarpment that contain all the government buildings. So it's a natural extension of this tourist attraction, let's say. We also want to build education center in this plant, so it's continuation. This is the second plant, the Smetny-Sowa. Again, we try to build it in such a way that it's a publicly accessible space. Again, we want to have a small education center, so for tourists and for community and for kids from school to come and learn about the energy and what government is doing, how we're moving forward to save the GHG, reduce the impact on the environment. So you can see it from towards the river. It's a slope proof, so people can walk on the top of that. Or from the other side, it's fully glass, so you can walk close to the plant and look inside to see the chillers and the boilers and how they operate. We think that will be a good attraction, and again, education piece for the kiddies to have a look and be involved more with energy savings. Stage 1 partners, very quickly. These are the people that delivering our project. Is a long 35 years commitment, P3 contract. And Engie is our operation. I understand that they are part of this presentation today. I think the important stuff is the product procurement, and it's we think that was an innovative way to doing things, not the P3. P3 came up from the value for money analysis and market sounding, and originally that was a DBF or OM contract, which is design, build, finance, operating, and maintenance. However, we have to shorten the finance portion. The finance portion over 35 years give lenders right to veto any changes to the contract that we want to do, which was not what we wanted to do. District energy system is a growing animal. We want to do the changes. We want to change the fuel. We already planned for that, but we didn't have a full agreement from the decision maker at the time when we did in stage 1. So we shortened the finance to about 7 years, 6.5, 7 years right now. And the question we had when we start procurement is how you incentivize the P3 partner to make a beautiful plant when the lowest price governs. So it's very, very hard to put a rigid requirement for aesthetics. Like, people have different perception of aesthetics. So how you do that? So the project was still awarded to the lowest NPV. However, we put some caveat into it. So there were notional credit to the cost of the project for certain aspect of the design. And if we set some targets, and if the private partner exceed this target, we assigned a credit that was lowering their NPV for evaluation purposes. It was only for evaluation. Later on, the price what they provided was the price they provided. The bid price still valid, but for evaluation, we're able to lower the better product, lower their price by certain points, and that's how the points were allocated. So we had up to $75 million for the technical credit, and technical credit were linked to for example, efficiency of the system. So we set government target, and targets were fairly conservative. So for heating, the target was 76.5% annual system efficiency over 35 years. So you may think that this is slow, but over 35 years, if you have to maintain this over the system, raw fuel in, energy delivered to the buildings, it's challenging. So, but we didn't want to say it too high, so it's impossible to achieve. So whenever you were above our target, you get certain points. Aesthetics was the other aspect of the two plans that we wanted to give the credit for, and we estimated $60 million. Actually, $60 million was for Cliff plant. It was a credit for aesthetic design, and there was additional $30 million for tiny pasture aesthetic design. And GHG emission was another aspect that we were trying our partners to excel with, and there was up to $50 million credit assigned for GHG emission savings. So the way it was calculated that we had, again, a target set up, and every ton per year above the target were given a credit up to 50 million. So the caveat for that one was that whatever you put in a bid, if you don't achieve it, the penalty was double the potential credit. So if you say that let's say for argument's sake, you will have 90% GHG savings and you 15 tons above our target, the penalty for not achieving that will be double the credit that we gave you for evaluation purposes. And again, the credit for evaluation was monopoly money, what I call it. It was a notional credit. when you don't achieve it, there was really hard costs. There were money that you have to pay back to government. Another incentive we have that was to increase sustainability achievement was we set up using Athena Institute impact estimator, maximum carbon impact in a construction. And the private partner has to meet it. There was no extra money to go below it, but there were penalties when you were above that. And the last thing that I think was the least effective, we asked for a private partner at the RFP stage to provide us with innovative submission package. So this package was for, if you get selected, what else can you do for us for extra money? So it wasn't part of the bid, but it was part of their ideas that they can move even further with their design, make it even better, but it will cost more money. And we were to look at that in the future when they get selected and decided whether we go ahead or not. And that really worked very well because it gave us a very good package at the end. Again, I have a hard time to move the slide. Here we go. Did I jump through 2 slides? No, I hope not. So now we're going into the stage 2. And what we did with the stage 2, we look at all kind of fuel we can use to replace natural gas. And don't forget, this is the government system, so it serves Parliament Hill and Parliament buildings. So we are not trying to use a cutting edge technology. We're looking at a proven technology that can be easily deployed, and it doesn't create us a lot of problem going for future. We're talking about 200 megawatts thermal and about 160 megawatt thermal and cooling, sorry, 218 in heating and 160 megawatt thermal and cooling. So we don't want to play with something that is not proven. We went through all these different possible low carbon fuel for heating, and the biomass came up as the first one, our choice. However, our Treasury Board doesn't recognize biomass as a carbon neutral fuel due to the GHG accounting methodology and time frame, stuff like that. So we have to kind of abandon that. So the next runner-up was electric boilers. The grid in Quebec, on the Quebec side, is extremely clean. They claim there's 2 kilograms of CO2 equivalent for 1 megawatt megawatt hour electricity. So it's very, very low. It's basically based on hydro, and it's fairly inexpensive. So that's what we decided to go. And a geo exchange was the next step after that, if we'll get the project approved. So at the present time, we got approved electrical boilers. We didn't get the geo exchange approved yet. As you can see, that's the emission factors that at 2025, when the stage 1 will be completed, will be 200 kilogram CO2 per megawatt hour on heating, basically because of the natural gas based heating, and 4 kilogram CO2 megawatt hour on cooling because it's all electric cooling. We used to have steam driven chillers. They all be replaced with electric chillers. 2029, when we get stage 2 implemented, we have approval and we're moving ahead right now with electric boiler plants that will be installed on the Gatineau side because of the clean electricity and lower cost. We'll drop the heating to down below 10 and the cooling will stay the same. It's the difference between 4 and less than 4 is the dispatch will change, and there'll be more dispatch from Quebec side than from Gatineau side. And that's it. If you have any questions, I guess, Giulia, it will be up to you now.
Yes, thank you very much, Tomasz. Sorry, I hear an echo. Yeah, thank you. We do have one question already from the public, which I would like to address to you right now. From Wouter Berduin, apologies for the pronunciation of the name. Tomasz, who set the targets for reducing GHG emission, the government or the city or other entities? And are targets part of a certain trajectory to reduce the emission in the next, say, 10 or 30 years?
Yeah, that was a government priority. It's not the city, it's the government. Don't forget the district energy system is owned by the government, and our project was approved right after the Paris Accord was signed. And so the government is looking at reducing GHG as an entire country. And we are leading the way within the federal government family to reduce GHG emission from the building. As you know, the GHG emission from the buildings for the heating, especially in Canada, is a huge amount of GHG. So we make it by switching to the lower carbon fuel.
Okay, thank you. I will have other question for you, but I'm going to keep it for later. So I invite everyone again to please write your question in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. In the meantime, we're going to proceed to the next presentation. So Eric, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Giulia. And let's see here. So I can control the slides. Thank you very much, Giulia, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Let's move to the other end of the world and into more district cooling, more specifically into Africa and Egypt. So in fact, Egypt is among the top 5 fastest growing economies in Africa in 2019 and 2020. And it's fueled by its rising population and a real estate sector growing about 15% a year. So in 2014, the electricity demand was actually 20% higher than the supply available in the country, triggering a lot of blackouts and issues within the power sector, but also an initiative to a large-scale power sector investment. So this growth also has some significant greenhouse gas emissions and water consumptions associated to it. So in order to meet that as an energy efficiency measure, the government of Egypt has started to more strongly promote district cooling, in particular for new cities, as part of their demand side management strategy. District cooling is not new to Egypt. There are in fact several district cooling facilities in operations, but they are all small to medium sized. And the market potential is forecasted to be around 1.2 million refrigeration tons on or before 2030. So in order to accelerate the deployment of the district cooling projects, the Ministry of Housing has already initiated the development of a district cooling code and also a district cooling regulatory framework associated to it. As we have seen in many development countries where the country is growing fast and the cooling demand is increasing, there is still a lack when it comes to awareness raising and also in standardization and policies and regulatory framework that really supports a true expansion of district cooling networks. See, there you go. But in March 2019, the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program launched an initiative to shift investments in Egyptian cities towards district cooling, and in more specific terms, towards low GWP, refrigerant, and high efficient district cooling system. Under this initiative, a project group was formed and a project that is administered by the United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP, which has also engaged local stakeholders such as New Urban Communities Authority and the Ministry of Housing in order to successfully implement the ideas and the structure of the initiative in the country. And in late 2018, DEVCCO was also assigned to first try to help formulating the initiative and get the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program to sponsor this project, but also to take some early development and procurement steps in one of the pilot projects called the City of El Alamein. And the new Alamein city is being built as a modern summer capital for Egypt. It's located about 110 kilometers west of Alexandria along the northern shoreline of Egypt and facing the Mediterranean Sea. The area is today mostly used by local tourists. They have their vacation homes and they go there for recreation purposes. But it also a lot of international visitors because the site is also famous for the World War II battle that took place in the vicinity of El Alamein shoreline. The development area is located just on the shoreline with a direct access to the Mediterranean Sea, and it consists of a mixed use of developments with hotels, residential units, and commercial buildings. And also in surrounding areas, there are hospitals, universities, and military facilities that are already constructed or under construction. The project is also announced by the Egyptian government as a fast-track project, which means that it is moving on a fast pace. And today, several of the high-rise buildings are already in advanced stages of construction. We expect the first cooling delivery by the end of this year, which means that we will not have a permanent district cooling facility in place by then. So it will be mainly done by temporary solutions. The permanent district cooling plant construction is forecasted to be around 2 years and will commence full operation in the year of 2025. The idea is also to follow the development pace of the project of the city with the district cooling system. So the district cooling will not be built in a one-off, it will most likely be built in several phases. The total market demand is assessed to be somewhere around 45,000 cooling tons, which by that is the largest district cooling project in Egypt and potentially in North Africa. The location of El Alamein is also very interesting from a technical and design point of view, as the Mediterranean Sea is very deep and rather cold outside of that spot of the Egyptian shoreline. So the initial seabed surveys and mapping of the shoreline indicates that there is cold water accessible at a reasonable distance from the city. So the idea is to use a combination of cold water from the Mediterranean Sea in combination with chillers, absorption or electrical powered chillers to produce the cooling energy to the network. From a business development point of view, the project is forecasted to host around $130 million in investment. And those funding are supposed to be raised from the national and international funding market. However, the project is also supported by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which are not only supporting the El Alamein project, but also supporting the initiative across Egypt to shift the investments in the cities. A key factor that we have been working on since this project started is also to make the district cooling viable from a price perspective, meaning that the end user should pay a cost equal to the alternative cost or less for district cooling services. So we cannot overcharge the market for district cooling services. The next step of the project will be to launch the procurement, to go out to the market and ask for for tenders, which is supposed to be happening in the next couple of months. So we'll be ready to ask for requests for information and later on also quotes for someone to take this project through its construction and operational phases. Coming back a little bit to the challenges besides the Alamein pilot project that the initiative is also working on, is to make this able to replicate this district cooling system of El Alamein to other cities in Egypt, which is very important for the initiative and eventually to also replicate it across North Africa. So in parallel with working with the pilot project, we are supporting the government to develop the district cooling code and make it available to the public, and also to develop standardized procurement procedures to make it easier for developers to have a go-to instance and an understanding what it means to develop a district cooling project. In Alamein, we are also making the district cooling connection mandatory, and we are looking into the opportunities of making that a mandatory connection in all the cities that we are looking into developing district cooling. In the beginning of this year, also the government issued a ministerial decree to implement a district cooling committee with local representatives from governments, ministries, and national and international experts to oversee the opportunity to incorporate district cooling in more than 15 cities across Egypt. So we see this as a really good opportunity also to replicate the pilot project of Alamein to other new development cities in the country. So we have a very interesting year ahead of us when it comes to Egypt and the pilot project of Alamein, and hopefully we'll soon be able to be on the market with the project and have a district cooling committee established. So with that, thank you, and I leave it back to you, Giulia.
Thank you very much, Eric. I invite you both, Eric and Tomasz, to turn on your camera so that we can start with the Q&A time. So we have just heard about two extremely interesting projects taking place in two very different parts of the world, but it's clear for both of them that on one hand, district heating and cooling, and on the other hand, district cooling are going to play a key role, particularly for what concerns the emission reduction. So my first questions to both of you would be, what was the, I'm sorry, can you still hear me? Okay. What was the main driver for, on one hand, the modernization of district heating and cooling network in Ottawa, and on the other hand, on the development of district cooling in El Alamein and in Egypt more generally? Particularly, I would like to know if you could elaborate on the current existing climate and energy policy objectives that are driving these changes and these new projects. Because, for instance, in the European Union, with the European Green Deal, we see a key role played by district heating and cooling for the decarbonization of the EU economy and for reaching exactly the goals of the EU Green Deal. So I would be interested to know, or what's the current scenario, the current policy scenario in the country you're talking about. Thank you. I don't know when to start. Feel free to go ahead.
I can start. As you asked the question about Ottawa first. Sorry, Eric. It will be very quick. So ESAP started in 2009 with 4 main objectives. There was an increased safety and operation and resilience of the system, decrease the GHG emission, all sustainable targets, decrease the cost of the operation, and leverage private sector in order to be more efficient in operation. So in 2009, as I said, there was explosion in a plant, and I guess every government is very risk averse, the driver was safety. Well, unfortunately, we didn't get the money at that time. That wasn't strong enough. So the next government came in, and there was very conservative, saving money. So we pushed the other goal on the top of the list, that will be saving money. Well, that didn't drive the boat either. So the next government came around, and it's every 4 years, the liberals came to power, and it was all about GHG savings. And that's where we get the money. So which driver? I think the GHG was the one that, tipped the balance, and we get into the federal budget. It's a big project, as you can imagine. We have money for entire 35 years of operation. It's not only capital construction, but also operation. So in government, when you sign the P3 contract, you have to have a budget for the entire length of the contract that includes fuel for the 80 buildings. So it's a huge amount of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Yes, no, I think for Egypt, it really took off in 2014 when they had this supply issue on the power side, and they have to start to grow and expand the power sector to be able to meet the growing demand in population. And in Egypt, there's also a fact that the cities are very old and they are basically overcrowded. So they have to move people to new cities, to new facilities outside of the old towns. And by those means, the drive were to reduce the need for power and the power spent for cooling purposes, because as in many warm climate countries, a lot of the power that goes to a building goes actually to cooling. In Egypt, it's about 50% that goes to cooling purposes. So they target that for natural reasons to see, can we reduce that portions by implementing district cooling? So it came strongly, I would say, from this power blackouts that Egypt suffered from in 2014, and alongside with that also to do it with GHG emissions to reduce their footprint of this expansion. And they have been seeking, of course, help from around the world to support them in this processing going forward. So one of the strongest initiatives right now with the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program is very much focusing on producing district cooling at a low GHG emission and as efficiently as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Before, you also talk about replication in other cities, but also in other countries in North Africa. How do you see it feasible? What are the main? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there is a big difference between Egypt and other countries in North Africa. So the idea is still that we are trying to make it happen in Egypt. First of all, a pilot case, replicate that into as many of we can of the 15 additional cities that is underway. But we are in the same time in discussion with governments of Morocco and Tunisia, where we see that there starts to be at least an acceptance to discuss district cooling and an understanding on the concept. So we are engaged on a government level and ministerial level to promote district cooling in this country so far. But they are a little bit, they are not in the same stage as Egypt yet. But hopefully in the next couple of years, they will see what is happening in Egypt and how Egypt is dealing with it. And that might be easier for them to follow at that stage. So we are trying to replicate it across Northern Africa.
Thank you, Eric. And I'm asking a similar question to you, Tomasz. What about replication in other cities in Canada? And maybe if you can just provide an overview of what's the development of, how is it going with the development of district heating in Canada more general, if you can provide a bit of an overview.
So I can only speak on behalf of federal government because that's what we're doing. And Ottawa have 55% of total real estate of federal government. So basically most of the buildings are located, federal government building located in Ottawa. And that's how the district energy system started. We got the little system privately owned in other cities, but district energy system is not very well known in North America, especially in Canada. I think this is a little bit of that. We need a mental shift to more community approach. Most of the big developers in Canada would like to own their own system, their own heating and cooling. They just don't feel that this is a right approach to give it to somebody else because they're afraid to be held hostage to one supplier. My argument was also always, you got natural gas supplier. There's a monopoly on it. It's one supplier. So what's the difference whether the boiler is in your building or it's somebody else's building and you provide? So, but it's a hard win. We need a mental shift. Now, I think with the GHG carbon tax and the entire social movement towards GHG emission savings, it's a better way to do it because it's very difficult to do it on a building per building, especially in a high density building. It's so much easier to do it on a district-ended system. So I hope we'll have a bigger spread of district-ended system in Canada in a coming future. But don't forget, we got maybe 5 big cities. The rest is spread around so big. Ottawa it's only 1 million people, but if you look from one end to another end, it's 100 kilometers. So it's very difficult for district-ended system to span that big city with the little residential building. The cost is not there, you know.
Thank you. No, indeed. And honestly, this is what also we're trying to push here in Europe. The approach, the decarbonizing building by building approach is not really the right approach. Whether we're calling it a district approach is the right approach to take, right? Especially in highly densely populated area. And I wanted also to ask you, because you talk about the fact that you're going to expand the networks. Are you going to expanding also only to other governmental buildings or also to residential?
Well, that's a very good question. And as being the federal government right now, we don't have a mandate to connect a private sector buildings. So we're working on it. We want to change the business model a little bit to allow us to span to other. But we can connect any other government or public buildings, whether it's municipal government, provincial government, or federal government. That's not a problem. We can easily double the size of the connection buildings just to spread to other federal government buildings in Ottawa. So there's a huge potential. We can most probably connect main office building downtown, private and municipal government. It will be very difficult to move into the cheap residential condo type of buildings that are built at a very, very low cost, at mainly electric heat very quickly, because it's a low initial capital cost, and operation O&M cost is passed over on the owner of the condo. So the developers are not keen to pay a premium to be connected to the district energy system if they can avoid it. So we work with the city right now for the new development to have some sort of incentive. I know Eric was talking about the mandatory connection to district energy system. Personally, I don't think is the right approach. What's forced on the people, usually they try to prove to you that it is a wrong decision. I rather have people voluntarily connecting. So if the city can give incentive to the developer, let's say they drop a business development tax or something like that, if you connect to the system, that will be their decision, their business decision, so they will embrace it. If you force on people something, it's much more difficult to swallow.
Thank you, Tomasz. I think this also depends on the realities that you are dealing with. And maybe, Eric, you can tell us if indeed this approach is successful in North Africa, in Egypt, and why you decided to adopt such approach.
Yes, sure. No, I fully agree with Tomasz. I think that mandatory connections is only valid under certain circumstances. When it comes to this type of developments, when a full city is built in such scale like Alamein, and there is a district cooling network put in place, they see that as any other infrastructure, meaning power or water, which is also mandatory connections. I think that definitely in more mature markets, etc., then of course it should be an incentivized solution to people should want to connect to a certain system. But it has been a lot of discussions surrounding this, but the decision right now about the city developer is that they want to have a mandatory connection because it will make it easier for them to raise the necessary funding and put basically the project into a package that is a viable funding project as well. So that's how we came to that conclusion. But I agree with Tomasz as well that it's not necessarily a good solution anywhere, but in particular for Egypt and this pilot case, I think that is the way to go forward.
Thank you. We received one question from Sophia, who is asking, In Europe, we see a bottom-up move from citizens to take the heat transition and development of heat networks in their own hands. City decarbonization targets, citizen cooperatives, etc. Do you see similar movements in other parts of the world, like specifically in Canada and in Africa?
I can have a cut at Canada. There is a movement, but I will call it movement on paper. When it comes to actual cost, I don't think too many people are willing to spend more money on green solution. And the reason I'm saying that, if you look at the new development, hardly any new buildings or residential building has any green solution that in Canada are very expensive. So you have to look at it that from the I think the solution has to be convenient and has to be financially affordable. In Canada, energy is very, very cheap. So natural gas is super cheap. If you want to replace it with a carbon-free fuel, it will cost you a lot of money. So A, you are really hardcore green person, or you got tons of money. Average person will not spend more money to have a green heating system, whether solar, thermal, or renewable natural gas, or green electricity. That's my take for Canada.
Yes, and I think for Egypt it's even more vague than in Canada. So I don't think it's actually not even on paper. Egypt is simply not there yet. So there is a long way to go.
Yes, however, if we want to respect the Paris Agreement and each countries will have to make an effort to switch from natural gas, because even in Europe it's super cheap, and obviously for consumers it's obvious that they don't want to pay more at the end of the month on their energy bills. However, that's why I think the city approach is very important, because at the end of the day, the cost of building whatever, if there's no district heating or district cooling network, won't be on the citizens per se, but more on the local authorities. So do you think I think in a way I see it happening already, and I see it possible in the future, because eventually we will need to move away from natural gas, and especially from talking about boilers, single-use boilers. So yeah. We have another question from the public. So this is for you, Tomasz. How will Canada reach its 2050 targets? If the spread between now natural gas and sustainable solution is that large, government subsidies, CO2 tax?
Okay, I lost my crystal ball. I don't have it now, so I can answer this question. It will be very, very challenging. And the reason for the challenge is, as I mentioned before, it's government makes a lot of effort, but without the grassroots movement, without people accepting that throughout the whole country, it will be very, very difficult. So will we reach the target? Maybe, maybe not. But we're doing the best we can. And don't forget, like, if you look at the Canada's GHG emission from, let's say, electrical grid, it's extremely low. I don't know if any countries in Europe can say that they got 2 kilograms per megawatt hour of electricity in a grid. This is very, very low. I know that Canada overall is much higher than that, it's in an order of 200 something, but we leverage what we can and we do the best we can. And again, I don't believe that we can reach the target without entire nation accepting it and willingly move in this direction, okay, at the cost, because it will cost more. There's no doubt in my mind that it will cost more.
Okay, then I would like to ask both of you. So overall, could you name the main challenges that you are experiencing in the development or modernization, in your case, Tomasz, of the projects that you're working on?
At the present time, I think the main challenge for us is to switch the business model. At the present time, the business model is owned and operated by the federal government, and All of you know that the government gets tons of red tape, tons of regulation, rules, requirements. So the decision-making process is extremely long. If we decide to connect a building today, it might take me 2 years to get the decision to connect this building, which is unheard of. If I want to hire you, Giulia, today, and we agree that, yes, there's a good match, you want to be part of our team, it will take me a year to get all the authorization to get you in place. So this is very difficult to operate a district energy system that's supposed to grow, be flexible. So that's one, is it's a decision-making process. The second is financial flexibility. If I want to connect, Eric, your building, for example, and you say, okay, Tomasz, you can connect me, but I don't want to pay upfront the connection fee. Can you spread it over the term of the contract? I can't do that. You know, I have to tell you, you pay upfront because I don't have financial flexibility to collect it through the rate, being federal government. I cannot go to the bank and borrow the money. All I have to do is apply officially through all the chain of command to Treasury Board. Treasury Board will put it in a budget, and eventually it will say yay or nay, and then we can move forward. Again, it takes years. So that's not the way to move forward with the district energy system. And so we will try to make it what we call in Canada Crown Corporation, which is still a government organization, but has much more flexibility, and it's not governed by the same rules as regular government. Amount of reports that we have to do on a project right now is phenomenal. And it takes time and takes money. And that's why our system is probably not very efficient that way. And moving towards the semi-private or crown corporation will make it more flexible, still with the backing of the government. That's my major challenge right now. Thank you.
Yes, and I think the major challenge we see in Egypt, and more specifically in Alamein, is actually to get this district cooling a compatible product compared to business as usual. I mean, it's very established the way they work in all, from government down to the end user of a cooling product, with the business as usual, installing local chiller with rooftop units. I mean, everything is aligned to just do that, so they know how to do it, they know how much it will cost. Every detailed permit, everything they need is kind of already there, so it's very easy for them to do very quickly, right? And when we start to describe something for them that is new, the district cooling, which is on all levels, from permitting procedures, government approvals, heavy upfront investments, collecting tariffs from the end users. So it's actually, for us, is to establish that model that is the main challenge, to get the acceptance from the government down to the end users that this is good for everybody. So I would say that is, for us in Egypt, currently the main challenge.
Okay, thank you very much. I invite people from the public to ask any question if you want by raising your hand or writing the Q&A box, because we're almost running out of time. So it's your last chance. And from my side, I have another question from you, Eric. Why Alamein? I mean, is it just one pilot project, or there are other cities across Egypt that are going through the same or similar projects?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, when we started this initiative, it was several projects that were in the portfolio. But of course, we don't have unlimited funding to do something, so we had to select the ones that we thought had the best chance of moving forward fast and in a favorable way. And Alamein was chosen from a technical point of view because its location close to the Mediterranean Sea, and we can potentially use that as a cold water source. The other one was also that it is a fully government hosted project, and it's on a fast track as well. So it means that when everything around the world is a little bit shaky right now and things are stalling due to the situation, they are prioritizing certain projects within Egypt, and Alamein is one of them that they are prioritizing. So we know that the government has full attention to really continue to develop that project. So that was the reason why we selected Alamein, and also a timing. It fits very well now when we started in 2018 to discuss district cooling, the project was in the right stage of development. It was not too early, it was not too late. So there was several parameters that weighed into that we choose Alamein in front of other projects. Not saying that we have left the other ones out, they are still there, and they are looking very closely to what is happening in Alamein as well. But yeah, the pilot of Alamein will be the first one, and then more will follow, and they also are in our attention box, so to speak.
Thank you very much, Eric. Very interesting. Maybe now I will ask, given that we only have 5 minutes left, I will ask both of you if you could give like final remarks to some other city in the world, could be Europe, anyone else that might be facing or might be going through a similar project. What advice would you give them based on your own extensive experience?
It's hard to advise somebody else without knowing what the main challenges are. I would say patience is the very important virtue when you try to implement a large project like that. I'm pretty sure Eric was working on his project for many years. We started in 2009 and we got the budget in 2016. So you can imagine the frustration going through several attempts to get the project off the ground and nothing was happening. Once we got approval, everybody wants to have it done next day. And so the next challenge is to get your team set up for really, really fast delivery, because expectations are very, very high, especially in case of GHG emission savings that the government really count on it. And there's a lot of public scrutiny at what you're doing, how fast you're going. And as you know, a big project like that has a lot of challenges. So an unforeseen twist that you have to overcome. Again, patience comes into play, and having a true partnership. We are very successful, very fortunate to have such a good partners, our design build partners and operation partners, Engie, that the cooperation is a true partnership. There always some stuff, as everybody knows, every project got some problems. And so far, it's a year and a half in a process, and we didn't encounter anything major that we couldn't overcome it at the project level to the mutual benefits.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and I think from the Egyptian perspective, I fully agree, Tomasz. Patience is the key word here, because we also worked quite a lot on this project long before it actually was shown into public. So it takes a long time to develop. District energy systems are in general have an extremely long digestion time. They have a very long preparatory time and fairly amount of execution as well and operation. But I think that what I would like to say to European entities and providers is that Egypt is a very interesting country, and it has a significant growth, just being on the top 5 on the African growing countries. And they are also looking very much towards Europe and European countries. They are seeking support, actively trying to get support from Europe and European countries. So they are located in a spot where I think they are closer to Europe than the rest of Africa, so to speak. So I really would like to see more European actors taking part in North Africa and Egypt. We know that there are some really interesting movements already. So definitely Europe is entering more and more into North Africa. And I hope that that will continue as well, because Egypt and North Africa need this support and knowledge sharing.
Thank you very much, both. It's been a very, very interesting and fruitful discussion, and I was honored I could moderate it. So now I think I will close the event by inviting everyone else to join our second part, so-called, of the World Tour, which will take place on May 5th during our Congress. And we will have a representative from the Kigali cooling program, by the way, because this session is going to focus mostly on district cooling. And we will hear about perspective from India and Curaçao. So please don't forget to register. And also, please take part, if you wish, to the next virtual Thursday meeting, which will take place next Thursday, the 15th of April. Thank you very much. It's been great speaking to you, and I wish you all a lovely afternoon.